remembers the story of King Saul? He was the first king of Israel. You know that story?
Yeah.
All right. Let's get started right away. This is in 1 Samuel 10, if you want to follow along. Now, there's a lot to read here, so I'm just going to paraphrase it for you. The prophet Samuel summoned all the people of Israel to come to him and told them, this is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says, and told them that God reminded him of how he brought Israel up out of Egypt, delivered them from slavery and all the kingdoms that oppressed them. And then he said, you've now rejected your God, who saves you out of all your disasters and calamities. And you have said, no, we don't want to have a theocracy. We don't want to have God over us. Appoint a king over us like all of the other nations. So now present yourselves before the Lord by your tribes and clans. In those days, the way people determined the will of God was by drawing lots and using a couple of things called the Urim and the Thummim, which were in the priestly order of Aaron. I'm not going to get into that right now, but they would use those to determine what God's answer was in any indication. And when Samuel had brought all of Israel before God, they started to draw lots to determine who the king was. Samuel already knew who the king was, but he needed to let everyone in Israel know. So finally, they ended up with Saul, the son of Kish, but they couldn't find him. So they asked the Lord, is the man here yet? Has he arrived? And the Lord said, yes. He's hiding in the baggage. He's hiding in the baggage. So they went and they brought him out. And here he was, a head taller than everybody else, looked really good. And Samuel said, do you see the man the Lord has appointed? He has chosen him. There is no one like him among all the people. And then all the people shouted, long live the king! Yay! So this looks really good at first. This looks very noble. Saul doesn't push himself forward. He's not self-seeking. Instead, he hides in the baggage so as not to draw attention to himself. This seems like an ideal king, right? Humble, self-effacing, not in it for himself, right? Let's look at the backstory. Because when we do that, there's a slightly different picture. Now, you know how in the Old Testament there's all these clans and tribes and ites. Well, the tribe of Benjamin, we're all descended from Benjamin, one of the sons of Israel. So they're called Benjamites. I want you just to get that. It's not some weird kind of Australian sandwich spread. There was a Benjamite, a man of standing whose name was Kish. Kish had a son named Saul, as handsome a young man as could be found anywhere in Israel, and he was a head taller than everyone else. This is one of the few places in the Bible where somebody's height is mentioned. So it must be significant, right? If God is going to point out the guy's height, there must be a reason for it. Obviously, it's because he has a calling of God on his life to be over everyone else. You get that little reference, over, yeah. God's real cute that way, isn't he? I am going to paraphrase again because this is really, really long. I am in 1 Samuel 9, if you want to follow along. Saul's father, Kish, had a bunch of donkeys, and they went missing. They wandered off. So Kish told his son Saul, take one of the servants and go find these donkeys. So they're searching hither and yon through all of the countryside, and they search for 3 days. They're walking around and asking and looking. And finally, Saul said, let's go back, or Dad is going to stop thinking about the donkeys and start worrying about us. The servant pointed out that in a nearby town there was a man of God who was highly respected, and everything he said came true. And he suggested, let's go there and see if he knows about the donkeys. So they set out for this town. And as they were going up the hill, they met some people and asked him, is the seer here? Now, in Old Testament times, a prophet was called a seer. Samuel the prophet was the seer. He was also the judge and prophet over Israel at that time. And these people said, yes, he's here. So they went up to the town. Now, the day before Saul came, God had shown Samuel a picture of Saul and told him, about this time tomorrow, I'm going to send a man to you from the land of Benjamin. Anoint him ruler over my people Israel. He will deliver them from the hands of the Philistines. I have looked on my people, for their cry has reached me. So when he saw Saul coming towards him, the Lord said to Samuel, this is the man I spoke to you about. He will govern my people. Saul didn't know any of this. He walked up to Samuel and said, would you please tell me where the seer's house is? Samuel said, that's me. I'm the seer. Go ahead of me up to the high place, for today you are to eat with me. They had a sacrifice planned for the high place. And in the morning I will send you on your way and tell you everything that's in your heart. As for the donkeys you lost 3 days ago, don't worry about them. They have been found. And to whom is all the desire of Israel turned, if not to you and your whole family line? Now listen to that again, because this is the first clue that things are going to go wrong. And to whom is all the desire of Israel turned, if not to you and your whole family line? Saul said, but am I not a Benjamite from the smallest tribe of Israel, and is not my clan the least of all the clans of the tribe of Benjamin? Why do you say such a thing to me? Did you catch that, church? Why do you say such a thing to me? Now, Saul appears to be humble. But listen to what happens next. Samuel brought Saul and his servant into the hall and seated them at the head of those who were invited, about 30 in number, and told the cook to bring the piece of meat that he had told him to set aside. Samuel said, Saul, here is what has been kept for you. It's been set aside for you for this occasion, from the time that I said I have invited guests. And Saul dined with Samuel that day. The next morning, as they were going down to the edge of the town, Samuel told Saul to send the servant ahead of him. I have a message from God for you. Tell your servant to go on ahead. Then Samuel took a flask of oil, poured it over Saul's head, and kissed him, saying, the Lord has anointed you ruler over his inheritance. And then comes a key piece of information. Samuel told Saul exactly what was going to happen. This is so Saul would know that the word came from the Lord. In Old Testament times, people expected to have a sign to confirm the word of God. There are a whole list of signs here. When you leave me today, you will meet 2 men near Rachel's tomb. They will tell you the donkeys that you set out to look for 3 days ago have been found. Your dad has stopped thinking about them and is worried about you. Then you will go on from there. 3 men going up to worship God at Bethel will meet you there. One will be carrying 3 young goats, another 3 loaves of bread, and another a skin of wine. This is pretty specific. You know, if somebody came up and said something that specific to you, do you think you might pay attention?
Oh, yeah.
Right, especially if it started to happen. One of these men will give you 2 loaves of bread, which you will accept from them. After that, you will meet a procession of prophets coming down from the high place. The Spirit of the Lord will come powerfully upon you, and you will prophesy with them, and you will be changed into a different person. Once these signs are fulfilled, do whatever you want to, because God is with you. He will back you up. Go ahead of me. I will surely come down to you, but you must wait 7 days until I come to you and tell you what you are to do. So guess what happened? Any ideas? All the stuff happened. As Saul turned to leave Samuel, God changed Saul's heart, and all these signs were fulfilled that day. When he and his servant came upon the road to Gibeah, which is where these prophets were supposed to be happening, a procession of prophets met him. The Spirit of God came forcefully upon him, and he joined in their prophesying. All of the stuff that God said was going to happen, happened. There's no doubt, or there should have been no doubt in Saul's mind, that this was the will of God, that he was the anointed king, and that he could step into his authority. When he got back home, Saul's uncle asked him, "Where have you been?" "Looking for the donkeys. But when we saw they were not to be found, we went to Samuel." Saul's uncle knew Samuel. He probably had some suspicions in his mind about what might have been said to Saul, and asked him, "Tell me what Samuel said to you." Here's another clue. Saul said, "He assured us that the donkeys had been found." That was it. Nothing else. Now, if somebody met you and poured a bottle of oil over your head and said, "I anoint you king over Israel," gave you all of these signs, which then happened to come true, don't you think that you might mention that? Wouldn't you want to tell somebody about that? We start to see a little bit more of the picture. Saul was called by God to be the king of Israel. 3 things stopped him from fulfilling his purpose: doubt, false humility, and finally, disobedience. Doubt, false humility, and disobedience. The doubt comes in right at the beginning of the story. But who am I? I'm a Benjamite. My clan is the smallest. I'm nothing but a worm. I'm so small. I'm just so insignificant. I can't possibly be king. Doubting the God who created him, the God who called him, the God who set a purpose for him. Doubting the word of God. Now, I know I'm not the only one who struggles with doubt. Does anybody else in here ever struggle with doubt even a little bit? Thank you for being brave and courageous. That's awesome. It's very easy when there are so many things against us to doubt the purpose that God has for our lives. You can look at all of the stuff that's going on. In my case, I've got elderly relative issues that are overwhelming at times. And I think, how could God possibly work through me? How could God possibly use me? Most of my time is occupied with paperwork and Medicaid and lawyers and nursing homes and all kinds of stuff. And all I'm thinking about, it seems like, is how to deal with all of these issues. How to deal with the phone calls that I get from the nursing home. How to deal with the problems that are happening with finding the right balance in medication and finding this and doing that, and she needs this and he needs that, and let's do this. I end up feeling like, God, I can't do anything for you right now. I just can't. I'm too busy. I have to work. I like to live indoors in the wintertime, so work is good. Yeah. And that doubt starts attacking me. How could I possibly have a purpose for you? How could I possibly do something for you? We all have a purpose. We all have a calling. I know it's a struggle sometimes to not hide in the baggage. I know it's a temptation. Hide behind all the baggage. Then I don't have to do all of this stuff. I don't have to step out on a limb. I don't have to trust God. But that's what I've been called to do. False humility. Oh, God wouldn't use me. I'm just a sinner, saved by grace. Does anybody else here ever thought that? Had that thought go through their mind? God wouldn't use me. Gary, thank you. Has anyone ever wondered if you had a purpose? Has anyone ever wondered what that purpose is? Why do I exist? What am I supposed to do with my life? Why am I here? God wouldn't use me. I'm from the tribe of Benjamin, the smallest clan. I'm going to hide in the baggage. Instead of looking at our circumstances, instead of looking at what we are not, church, we need to look at what we are. We are the beloved of God. We are the ones that God loved so much that he gave his only begotten Son for us. That's who we are. And that's how we find our purpose. We don't need to keep hiding in the baggage. The third thing that Saul fell into, besides doubt, false humility, is disobedience. 1 Samuel 13, the Philistines were assembled to fight Israel, and they had 3,000 chariots and 6,000 charioteers and more soldiers than anybody could count. And when Israel saw that their situation was critical and their army was hard-pressed, they hid. Not in baggage. It says, in caves and thickets, among the rocks, and in pits and cisterns. All the troops with Saul were quaking with fear. He waited 7 days, the time set by Samuel, but Samuel didn't come. Saul's men began to scatter. So he said, "Bring me the burnt offering and the fellowship offerings." And he offered them up himself. Just as he finished making the offering, Samuel arrived. "What have you done, Saul?" Saul said, "Well, I saw the men were scattering and you didn't come at the set time and the Philistines were assembling, and I thought now the Philistines are going to come and I haven't sought the Lord's favor, so I felt compelled to offer the burnt offering." Samuel said, "You've done a foolish thing. You've not kept the command the Lord your God gave you. If you had, he would have established your kingdom. But now your kingdom will not endure. The Lord has sought out a man after his own heart and appointed him the ruler of his people because you have not kept the Lord's command." Another situation of disobedience. God told Saul to attack the Amalekites. He was using Saul and Israel as a weapon of vengeance. This is hard for us to understand in the 21st century, but it was an expected thing in the New Testament that if a people needed to be punished by God, God would totally destroy them in war. And he told Saul, "Annihilate everything in this town. Men, women, children, livestock, everything. Destroy it all." Saul spared the king. He spared the best of the livestock and sheep and cattle. Everything that was good they kept. Everything that was despised and weak they totally destroyed. Everything that was good they kept. Then the word of the Lord came to Samuel. "I regret that I have made Saul king because he has turned away from me and has not carried out my instructions." When Samuel met Saul, he asked him, "What is this bleating of sheep that I hear? What is this lowing of cattle that I hear?" See, Saul had gone down to Carmel and set up a monument in his own honor. False humility, remember? I am the least. Well, now he's got it in his mind that he is the best, and he's gone to set up a statue in his own honor. Couldn't wait for God to honor him. Needed to do it himself. He saw Samuel, said, "The Lord bless you, I've carried out God's instructions." Samuel said, "No, you haven't. I'm hearing sheep, I'm hearing cows." Saul answered, "The soldiers brought them from the Amalekites. They spared the best of the sheep and cattle to sacrifice to the Lord your God, but we totally destroyed the rest." There's a couple things in here. Again, it looks good on the surface. We spared the best as a sacrifice, but we totally destroyed everything else just like we were supposed to. Did you reference how he spoke of God to Samuel? The Lord, your God. Not the Lord, my God. Not Saul's God. Samuel's God. Something is really off here now, isn't there? Samuel said, although you were once small in your own eyes, did you not become the head of the tribes of Israel? The Lord anointed you king, and he sent you on a mission. Go and completely destroy those wicked people. Why did you not obey the Lord? Why did you pounce on the plunder and do evil in the eyes of the Lord? But I did obey the Lord, Saul said. I went on the mission the Lord assigned me. I completely destroyed the Amalekites and brought back Agag, their king. He wasn't told to bring back the king. He was told to kill him. The soldiers took sheep and cattle from the plunder, the best of what was devoted to God, in order to sacrifice them to the Lord your God. Again, he says, the Lord your God, not the Lord my God. That doubt, that unbelief is still prevalent in him. But Samuel said, does the Lord delight in burnt offerings and sacrifices as much as obeying the Lord? To obey is better than sacrifice. To heed is better than the fat of rams. For rebellion is like the sin of divination, and arrogance like the evil of idolatry. Because you've rejected the word of the Lord, he has rejected you as king. Then Saul said, I have sinned. I was afraid of the men, and so I gave in to them. He was afraid of his men? He's the king. What he says goes. How many of us have wanted to hide in the baggage and not stepped into the authority that God has given to us? Now I beg you, forgive my sin and come back with me so that I may worship the Lord. But Samuel said to him, I will not go back with you. You have rejected the word of the Lord, and the Lord has rejected you as king over Israel. What happens next is that Samuel turned around to leave, and Saul caught a hold of his cloak, and it tore. Samuel said to Saul, God has torn the kingdom from your hand. He's not a human being that he should change his mind. And here's the real key. Saul said, I've sinned, but please honor me before the elders of my people and before Israel. Come back with me so that I can worship the Lord your God. Appearances. He was afraid to not be honored. He was afraid of the appearance that it might cause if Samuel didn't come back with him. False humility had turned into pride. I've struggled with all of these things. Those of you who know my story know that it was a big effort for me to step out of my little shell and start doing what God called me to do, start fulfilling my purpose. A long time ago, shortly after I became filled with the Spirit, I was visiting a friend in another city. She was at work, so I was walking around, looking at things, giving myself a little tour. And I walked into a park, a little town square, if you will, and there was an older gentleman sitting on a park bench. And I had a strong impression that I should go up and say, Billy, your mother was right. God knows what's going on. It's going to be okay. Now, did I step out in courage and boldness and follow the word of the Lord? No, I did not. I said, well, how do I know his name is Billy? doubt. I can't really do that. I'm not a prophet of God. False humility. What is he going to think? What if I'm wrong? I can't do this. And then I had another thought. Nobody has called him Billy since he was a child. That's what his mom called him. Nobody else did. Go up and call him Billy. He'll listen to you. I couldn't do it. I turned and walked the other way. Disobedience. Hiding in my baggage. And about 15 minutes later, as I came back around the other side of the park, this gentleman was walking along, crossing the street, and another man came and saw him and said, "William, my friend, how are you?" His name was William. It still breaks my heart to know that I missed that opportunity. What could God have done not only for Billy, but for me if I had been obedient? I went back to my friend's apartment and cried. And I've prayed ever since then that God would have sent somebody who wasn't afraid, who didn't hide in the baggage, who would be obedient to minister to that man, to give him the message that God wanted him to know. Church, every single one of us has purpose. Every single one of us has a call on your life. You have been created to do something wonderful. You have been created to bring light and life and joy into other people, to bring the life of God into other people. If you don't know what that purpose is, ask God. He'll tell you. Don't hide in the baggage. Don't be full of doubt, false humility, thinking, oh, God wouldn't use me. Yes, he will. He definitely will. I once saw a sign, God never asks about our ability. He asks about our availability. There's a huge difference. Every single one of you has a reason for your existence. Every single one of you has a purpose. Every single one of you has a mission that you and you only can fulfill. Every one of you. Jan, your purpose is to bring light and joy to the people around you. Gypsy, your purpose is to stand in the gap for those who can't stand for themselves. Your purpose is to be an advocate. And I'm going to tell you right now that God says your name is no longer Gypsy. You're not going to be a wanderer. Because he has planted you, and you are solidly rooted, and you are going to stand firm for those who cannot stand for themselves. Christine, God has such grace on your life right now. And your words have more power than you know. When you talk, the things that come out of your mouth, God brings into existence. You have that kind of calling, that the things you say will happen. Helen, God has called you to speak his word, to be a comfort to the people around you. You started to find that out last summer, that you can hear from God, that you recognize His voice. Every single one of us has a purpose. Every single one of us has a calling. Don't hide in the baggage. Don't hide from your purpose. Step out into your calling. John 14, verse 12 says, "Very truly I tell you, whoever believes in me will do the works I have been doing, and they will do even greater things than these, because I am going to the Father. And I will do whatever you ask in my name, so that the Father may be glorified in the Son. You may ask me for anything in my name, and I will do it." So those of us who think, well, I can't really do anything. I'm not a pastor. I haven't gone to seminary. I'm not ordained. That's hiding in the baggage, church. It doesn't matter how much training or how little training we have. We all have the power as believers to step out into the calling that God has for us, to step into the authority that He has for us. That authority includes healing people, raising the dead, cleansing those who have leprosy, driving out demons, giving sight to the blind, giving hearing to the deaf, on and on and on. Greater things than these will you do. Don't hide in the baggage, church. Step out. Ask God what your purpose is if you're not sure. He'll tell you. He'll show you. He'll start bringing people across your path. Each of you has a purpose. Each of you is individually seen and loved by God. Don't hide in your baggage. Missy, your servant's heart is something that gets called up a lot. People remark on that a lot. But there is coming something for you that is far beyond anything you even imagined. It's even better than the Cubs winning the World Series. Yeah, it is. It is. It's even better than the Cubs winning the World Series. All the joy that you felt when that happened is going to be nothing compared with what God is about to bring to you. There is so much in store for you because He has seen the way you serve and give, and there is so much coming that it's beyond your comprehension.